Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today is Sunday, September 10th. As always, let's set our intention and make aspirations by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So I'm going to read you something, then we're going to meditate, and then Tori's going to speak for a little bit. Unless you want to speak first before meditation. It's better for you.
Yeah, maybe maybe I'll read the verses from Garchen Rinpoche's teaching that was transcribed by a student, and we can take that into meditation.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm going to read something first. This is from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, a student wrote to him and said that he was writing about some difficult situations the student had been encountering in his office and how people hadn't reacted well when he voiced his concerns. And often we get, we discuss in this class and the questions people talk about conflicts, difficulties in personal relationships in family and workplace and stuff like that. So when I read this, I thought it was appropriate for the class. And it might be a little bit different than what you really think of in terms of Buddhism, and in terms of what you're doing with your own practice and why you're practicing and stuff. Just FYI, those of you who are on Instagram, which I'm assuming all of you or most of you are, the page is Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, LAMAYESHE Wisdom Archive, Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. My dear one, just because you might have some problem with others, it doesn't mean you always need to express it. Sometimes it is more skillful not to express it. Otherwise, you might get in a fight with others, and this is not so helpful. When you are practicing bodhicitta, sometimes you do have problems, but you don't express them. You try to practice. You try to do what is most beneficial for the happiness of others, not for yourself. I'll read that again. You try to do what is most beneficial for the happiness of others, not for yourself. Western psychology is all about one's own happiness. Doing what makes oneself happy, that is the main thing. So if there is something you need to express, you do it. But Buddhism is completely the opposite. It is not about one's own happiness. It is about the happiness of others. By practicing this way, thinking about the happiness of others, working for the happiness of others, you achieve two things: the happiness of enlightenment and temporal happiness, happiness in the future and happiness now. When you're working for your own happiness, you do not get either. You do not get happiness in the future and you're not happy now. When you work for the happiness of others, when you are concerned about the happiness of others, you get both. Now, specifically, he's referring to those who are practicing bodhicitta. Basically, what he's referring to is saying if you're a Buddhist practitioner, which not all of you are, and I get that, and not all of you are here practicing meditation to practice Buddhism, but we've often spoke about this distinction because sometimes the questions and discussions can, it seems people are looking for kind of a self-help thing rather than just questions or help with their Buddhist practice in particular. So, and that's where we always try to delineate, because we're not really qualified to talk about self-help. We're not psychologists, obviously. We're not practicing that, and we're not really even talking about things in any kind of such psychological terms. This is not to say we're against psychology or therapy. I'm a big proponent of it. If you have specific issues that need that, and if that works for you, that makes you happy. What we're talking about is a bit of a misconception in Buddhism. Victoria and I don't really separate our meditation practice from our practice of Buddhism. You don't have to do what we do. You can totally practice meditation in a secular way. I'm just talking about how where we're coming from point of view wise, and I thought this really kind of expressed that delineation that we so often kind of get into. Again, he's specifically saying Buddhism is the opposite. Those who are practicing bodhicitta. So if this is what you're into, if this is what, if you are a Buddhist, if you have taken refuge, if you aspire to Buddhism, if it's something that you think is the path you want to follow, then this, what Lama Zopa's talking about here really has to be taken to heart. In the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, which Victoria, Nick, if you get a chance, we're going to send you Victoria sent you a link. 37 practices of the Bodhisattva that Garchen Rinpoche often reads about. Nick just posted the link in the chat toolbar thing here, and we're going to put it on our website. A lot of that goes into, the only way to really be happy is to be of benefit to others. And once again, we're not talking about being a doormat. You're having trouble at work. Buddhism also demands a certain amount of discernment from you. That's where wisdom comes into play. How do I approach this situation? How do I deal with this problem in a way that's in line with my practice and is not just about doing what makes oneself happy here? Again, this is completely from a Buddhist point of view. So you have to decide what you want to do with what I just read. And again, this really is very much in line with a lot of the discussions we have when we talk about these kind of interpersonal relationships and stuff. We're really trying to come, when we talk about it, when we try to answer questions and stuff, really kind of be faithful to this point of view. So I thought this really expressed it really well. That said, Victoria's going to speak for a bit, and then we'll sit and meditate for a bit.
And it has, the quote I'm going to read is from Garchen Rinpoche's teaching on Ganges Mahamudra, which is the considered kind of the ultimate teaching, because it's a teaching on the view of how to perceive phenomena and the self. So the nature of phenomena, the nature of the self. And Garchen Rinpoche, and it's very tied into what Michael was just saying before, and the quote from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, because all rivers lead to this ocean, the ocean of wisdom, and very much in line with this quote that I'm going to read. So Garchen Rinpoche says, today's teaching will deal with the ultimate truth because it deals with the view. And if we wish to see the ultimate truth, because we have, in Vajrayana Buddhism, we deal with two levels of truth: relative truth and ultimate truth. Relative truth, obviously, it's karma, cause and effect. Ultimate truth, it's the view, the view through which we perceive and view the nature of all things, self, other, and phenomena. So Rinpoche says, today's teaching will deal with the ultimate truth. And if we wish to see the ultimate truth, yet we have not given rise to loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta in our mind stream, it will not be at all possible to recognize the ultimate truth that is the nature of mind. It is said that we will not see this ultimate nature without having accumulated 3 limitless eons of virtue. What this means is that we must give rise to awareness that is the non-dual union of emptiness and compassion in our mind streams in order to recognize the ultimate truth. That is the only, that is only done on the basis of the accumulation of merit through cultivating bodhicitta. To elaborate a little bit on this point, when we talk about bodhicitta, is translated and is captured with more than one. There's no direct translation of bodhicitta because there is no correlative structure in English language. Bodhicitta is translated as mind of enlightenment and mind of compassion. Enlightenment and compassion being a union, it's the same. So the view, the view is seeing reality, the nature of all things in one way that simultaneously gives rise to compassion, and that is the active component of this mind of enlightenment. It's like the sun is bright and warm. The brightness and warmness are intrinsic qualities. In the same way, giving rise to mind of loving, mind of compassion is the same as the mind of enlightenment. They are like the warmth and the brightness of one and the same state of mind. In terms of bodhicitta, we also, and that is the ultimate, when we speak about ultimate bodhicitta, is that we understand the empty nature of all things, and out of that arises ultimate limitless compassion. It's not the same kind of compassion as being a nice guy. It's not the same state of mind as being a nice guy 1 minute and then not so nice and selfish person in the next. No, it's the consistent mind of luminosity and compassion that is consistent throughout, because it is based on seeing reality directly. That is ultimate bodhicitta, or, I'm sorry if I fall short of description. It should be really an experience that we have experientially, that we sit to meditate in order to get to experientially. And we don't get to it just as a question of several sessions. The mind has to ripen through merit and wisdom. The two things, merit and wisdom, the two obscurations. If we don't have merit and wisdom, and merit we can only get when the afflictive mind is overcome, and ignorance is overcome by overcoming the me, the ego mind. So when we overcome afflictions and ignorance of the ego grasping, we get to the state of ultimate bodhicitta. Often ultimate bodhicitta is introduced first because that is the view, and even though we don't have it, it's like we've never gone to the sun, but we know it is there. We know even that the sun exists when we are sleeping in the night. We are aware that without the warmness of the sun, without its presence in our system, there would be no life on this planet, and we couldn't go and sleep in this darkness and be assured that the next day when we arise, the sun will be there. So even without the full presence of ultimate bodhicitta, it's like we've never traveled to the sun, but we know it is there. We know it sustains and gives life. It is the basis for all the relative things that happen in this world, like night and day and sleeping and waking, etc., etc. Then we speak about relative bodhicitta. How do we get to ultimate bodhicitta? Is we train in relative bodhicitta. And relative bodhicitta is like trying to start to turn the heart, the mind, the seat of the mind, the heart, into loving compassion and awareness. In other words, the training itself is the mind does the work of being aware. Am I working for the benefit of all sentient beings, or am I being stuck in the mire of selfishness and ego grasping? That's ignorance. So awareness is working to illuminate what we are doing. Am I being concerned only for myself and therefore in a state of ignorance? It takes two components. It takes this light of the sun to become aware. Am I working for myself, or am I working for the ultimate state of liberation of self and other. And the active component, the warmth, is knowing that I am changing my heart, my mind from selfishness to this work for the benefit of others. And Rinpoche in this quote says, there is no hope of any kind of thinking about ultimate truth. Remember, ultimate truth is not another concept in the big, conceptual library of the ego. It's not like this other kinds of a thing we can go into our grocery department and pick off the shelf of relative mind, because conceptual mind is just this relative mind that helps us cross the street, that helps us do the groceries, but it is not in the realm of conceptual mind, this mind of enlightenment. Mind of enlightenment is like the sun that gives life to everything. It's not a thing that it abides here on this earth. It's that which gives the possibility, the very nature of all, the ground of occurrence on this relative plane, but it is not one of these relative things. It is that which gives possibility to rise of all these relative things. And so please remember that when we sit to meditate and we want to get the glimpse of the sun of the mind, we want to get to this ultimate nature, which is called ultimate, mind of bodhicitta, of ultimate bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, mind of compassion. We have to start by working on this relative level, on awareness and activity of compassion. Awareness is knowing that I am not in this dualistic mind grasping of selfishness. And at the other component of it, the warmth component of it, is constantly turning and changing and transforming the ordinary habitual way of life and thinking for myself. We're transforming it into the activity of compassion. We're constantly checking with luminosity of our mind, with our awareness. That's what awareness means. We're constantly looking at our mind. Where am I? What am I doing? What mental state am I abiding in? And we do the same thing in meditation, of course. But in meditation, we go a little bit further to quench the mental or the relative activity of the ordinary mind, to see the nature of the mind, because our basis is always the presence of the sun. Without the sun, nothing is happening in our life. That's why, we talk about emptiness and we talk about space-like nature of mind, because the mind transcends all this little comings and goings. And so I wanted to address that today. And the second thing I wanted to read to you was another a quote from the same teaching. And it's a very interesting way of how Rinpoche talks about the basis, the cause of suffering. When we talk about suffering, we have three kinds of suffering, but we don't need to get into it right now. But Rinpoche is addressing the cause, the principal ground of what suffering, how suffering arises, the mechanism. And it's so poignant and so incredible, and we should take that into meditation. And Rinpoche says that when we speak of suffering, there are two types. There are outer sufferings of the body and speech, and inner mental sufferings. That's why we also can talk about relative and ultimate bodhicitta. The mind requires ultimate bodhicitta, body and speech, because we are moving within the relative confines of activity, of phenomenal world. We need a relative bodhicitta. A mind and body, we're always checking, making sure that everything that is coming out is based on an ultimate sense of bodhicitta. And we're always making sure that the mind and body remains very, very ethical. And that is karma, cause and effect. That is our relative level. At the same time, the inner workings of the mind, we are transcending that level and seeking the ultimate ground of the nature of mind. Anyway, There are outer sufferings of the body and speech, and inner mental sufferings. With regard to the latter, the mind, that is really conditioned by hope or expectation. On the other side, conditioned by doubt. Our mental state often is just this movement between this hamster movement between the things we desire and the things we want to avoid and the things we fear and reject. With regard to the suffering of body and speech, we engage in many activities to accomplish worldly benefit. Whether or not those activities will bear fruit is dependent on the actions of the past. That's what karma means. Whether or not those activities will bear fruit is dependent on the actions of the past. So whether or not they are accomplished really depends on karma. In this way, then, we can separate the mental suffering that we are experiencing from the sufferings that arise through body and speech. For example, when our hopes and wishes are not achieved, when worldly activities we engage in are, and then Rinpoche refers to the root text. So when the hopes and wishes are not achieved, we feel despondent, we feel pain. And then Rinpoche goes right to the root of what the cause of all suffering is. And he says, suffering, this hopes and fears, the basis of these hopes and fears, the basis of suffering itself is when we follow after thoughts that arise in the mind. That is the basis of suffering. These chains of thoughts that arise one after the next, like the beads on a mala or a rosary, this following after thoughts of hopes and fears, one after the next, in an interrupted continuous stream, is what the basis of all suffering is. If, on the other hand, we do not follow after the thoughts that arise, they appear and then they immediately dissipate, like the bubbles appearing and bursting on the surface of the water. When we abide in this mind that is free from fixation of hope and fear, fixation on the reality of objects that we perceive. When we abide in this mind that is free from fixation on arising thought, that is the ultimate truth itself. So it is that level of mind that we want to get to in meditation. It doesn't mean that the mind is vacuous and nothing is happening. What that means is we allow the thoughts to arise, but we know to let them go. That's what mindfulness is, and that's what meditation is watching our mind and knowing that the arisings are like the bubbles on the surface of the limitless ocean of mind that is the basis. And we are really kind of separating and staying with the limitless surface of the mind and letting the bubbles arise and dissipate. We are not following them. That's what Rinpoche said. That is the basis of suffering, is when we follow the bubbles like endless crumbs to the dark forest. The basis of suffering, Rinpoche says, is these little bubbles of hopes and fears in limitless chains of arising that we follow one after another, and we generate them as we follow. We generate more and more and more, and thereby we're generating endless suffering fluctuating between hope and fear. Is the nature of suffering. It's not the things that we get at the end of these bubbles, how they kind of like evolve into specific kinds of things. Suffering is already initiated and itself is just following crumb after crumb, bubble after bubble, in an uninterrupted following and attachment and grasping from one thought to the next, to the next, to the next. That's suffering. When we can't really stop the bubbles arising, but what we can do is kind of let them go as they arise and watch them like smart moviegoers. We can say, Oh, I see those images on the screen, but my mind is like the lamp of the projector and the empty screen on which infinite images can arise. We're not pursuing the images. We're not going after the bubbles and the crumbs. We're like the limitless empty screen on which anything can arise, because we have the emptiness and luminosity, like the lamp of the projector and the screen. And on that screen, anything can arise because of that two qualities of our mind: emptiness and luminosity, the lamp and the screen. Except our luminosity is not a light bulb, it's infinite luminosity that never stops. It has no button. It is kind of the ground, it's the nature. And the other component is the screen. It's the sky on which the clouds are moving along. It's the infinite. Those are the two infinite components of the nature of mind: emptiness and luminosity. So as intelligent moviegoers, we're not controlled by the images on the screen. We know that the images are arising, but we are not jumping into the narrative and chasing every image that arises. And that's what we should take into meditation. And we should take that in all behaviors. We should be meditating. Our awareness should be constantly present, whatever we're doing. But we take the time of formal meditation to really capture and know that essence of mind. And that's what we should take into meditation.
I have a question, kind of anticipating maybe some of maybe what some of our viewers might ask. So how does what most people really consider suffering, things like illness, loss of a loved one, financial difficulties, uncertainties, uncertainties in life, fears, or even abusive relationship, things like all those kind of things that people really consider their day-to-day sufferings. How does that relate to the definition of suffering that you've just explained?
Just as Garchen Rinpoche's quote said, following one thought after another, whatever we get in this life, financial hardship, difficult body with different illnesses, different partners, etc. Those are results of past actions. That's what karma means. In the meantime, how we react and respond to these moment by moment arisings. In other words, if we have an illness, but then we're not just experiencing the difficulty of the illness, we're also saying, oh, why me? Poor me. Why do I get, if we're by engaging in that way of aversion and fear, we're creating more future karma. So in other words, we're already creating more, and also we're creating compounded suffering. So if we, from the view side, from the point of the view, the view is more of the ultimate and the karma is the relative. It's what's happening, the arising. The view is the mind that is looking at these images on the screen and is being in a certain way. If the mind can stay in place and say, all these things are arising because this is my karma, we are not getting more afflicted by doubling down and saying, God, I hate this situation. How can I change this situation? I desire a different situation. I don't want this body. I don't want these wrinkles. I don't want these illnesses. I don't want this partner. If we understand karma and we're not getting so graspy and attached to what is happening, we can endure with a mind that can stay in its own place and not be swept away. We're creating much less karma for ourselves. We also have a hope of creating positive karmic circumstances, better rebirths for the future. But at the same time, on the side of the view, we can stay in the mind that is more liberated. Of course, a certain portion of our mind will always be engaged in the experience, but by how we how we experience different situations is what determines what kind of karma and things we deal with in the future. Eventually, we become more like an electrical car. The less we engage, especially with an afflicted mind, I want this and I don't want this. The less of hope and fear we respond to at any given arising when situations arise. Uh, we become our exhaust system becomes less and less toxic, and we exhaust simply less, so our mind becomes more and more liberated. We have bigger chunks of time where our mind is not so engaged with every little bubble. It's like, yes, there are bubbles. It's like we go out in the rain, right, and we're pursuing every little drop of rain that is in our eyesight. Or we can simply say, okay, it's raining, and let me just pull out my umbrella of mindfulness and stay under that. And that is how the mind becomes more and more liberated. At the same time, we create less and less negative karma, because the more we engage with the mind of hope and fear, the more we engage pursuing every little thing that happens to us with this me mind. Why does this happen to me? Why do I get this? Why do I have a bad boss? Why do I have a difficult child? Well, the answer is simple. We get all those things because that's our karma. And when we deal with this karma in this kind of an umbrella way, with a mind of awareness and mindfulness, we can allow things to happen, but not be crushed by them on one hand, and not pursue every little drop of rain that's appearing in our path all day long. We will be in the rain for a long time. For as many lifetimes, we will cycle and be reborn until our mind is liberated and attains full Buddhahood. So we might as well do it with grace. And we might as well, grace being the view, and we might as well do it with focusing all of our energy not on creating more suffering by pursuing this relative mind, but by pursuing ultimate enlightenment, by knowing that on the relative level, whatever is happening, my body and speech are engaged, whatever my world, this relative reality is, that is a result of my karma. At the same time, remembering our ultimate nature, stay on the side of ultimate nature, let things happen, and make sure that these reactions are not taking all of your mental energy and sucking you out to the side of the images on the screen. Stay with the awareness of the light and the screen, if that helps. These are, of course, only metaphors, but the mind does really have these kinds of characteristics of everything is capable of arising in our mind, and everything that arises is capable of dissolving into emptiness again. And so when we understand that, when we understand interdependence, we understand impermanence and karma, cause and effect, the mind can stay on this side. Remember, every difficult situation that arises, a difficult body, a difficult situation, illnesses, financial difficulties, these are all temporary. They will eventually cease. This body is made of inferior materials, 5 elements. Eventually, this body will cease. It will dissolve. And with it will dissolve all the physical relative things that arise for this body and speech. They will dissipate. And so there's no need to get so crazed and so engaged and so obsessed. The mind becomes so obsessed with what's happening to me. This me will dissolve. When this body, the 5 elements are dissolved, the persona, the identity that goes with it in this particular lifetime, the Victoria will dissolve. And then the mind will travel and take on another essence, another vessel. So there's no reason to obsess so much with what is happening to me. This me will dissolve with the vessel. We won't have the memories of all this unless we attain full enlightenment and we come into the world to benefit sentient beings, like the teachers who come in with full memory intact because they've exceeded that karmic level altogether, and they can come back with memory of how to teach idiots like us. And and they come in with the wisdom mind intact already. So of course they do come in the reincarnations, they often remember all their past lives that go back to like, who knows. But that's not, that's a topic that we're not really qualified to speak about. That's a question for a teacher who has these kinds of memories. And like Dalai Lama says, he can remember his past lives to before time of the Buddha, which is 2,500 years ago. So it's for teachers like that. For us, it's just, it helps us to know that all the karma and all the temporary happenings will exhaust and dissolve. They will cease along with this present vessel. And the mind, when the mind separates from the body, this vessel, which will of course will dissolve to, whatever 5 elements, whatever the, molecular, presence, it will, it will cease in this form and take another form. The this body made up of 5 elements that comprise everything in this universe. That's another way of understanding interdependence. The sofa, Michael, the floor, this is all 5 elements. And so, the separation is just a mental thing that we create. It's not real. There's no separation. Everything is interconnected. Reality is only one. But with this form, when the mind leaves the body, when the 5 elements go back to whatever else, they go back to themselves. That body is not Victoria. That's like a corpse, that identity is lost with that vessel. So no need to get so fixated on what's happening to me. Take out the me out of the formula and the suffering will lessen significantly. Think of others and the suffering will lessen significantly. Think of others and there's a chance of feeling and tasting a more ultimate nature of our mind, because that nature is always there. It is the basis of all things. We will come to that essence no matter what. We'll be here for as many cycles as will be required for us to attain this enlightenment. We might as well not waste time. Remember the precious human birth and try to stay on the path now.
Thank you very much. With that, let's sit. We did a very detailed review last week, so we're not going to do one this week. If those of you have never been here before, the first 2 classes of this year on the website, Meditation with Michael Imperioli, is YouTube. So that's mid-January 2023 in the archive. You can find a detailed review, or last week's when that is posted. I don't know if that's posted yet. September 3rd. So let's just start in the what?
I'd like to just add one more thing to the meditation. If your mind cannot abide on kind of the ultimate presence where you're just looking at the mind, if a difficult person comes up in your mind, at that time practice Tonglen, taking the dark from them and sending the light to them, and keep alternating, mind in its ultimate state, and when the difficulties arise, take out the dark and exhale the light.
Yeah, maybe next week we'll do it. Tonglen is a technique that maybe we've done in the past, but maybe we'll review that next week. So just sit in your posture, focus on the breath. Relax, even breath. Stay with your practice as I speak. Last week we worked on 2 techniques. One is just focusing on where the air is moving in and out of your nose, where the nostrils meet the upper lip. Focus on the air moving there. And when a thought arises in the mind, which it will, just say to yourself, back to the breath, and then, put your attention back on that place between the upper lip and nose. until you're aware of the next thought that has arisen. Don't judge the thought, don't push it away, don't follow it. Just notice it and apply the technique, which is back to the breath. Focus your attention back on the breath, where it's moving. Or the second technique we use is a visualization. And we've settled into this very vast sky-like nature of mind, this limitless blue, unstained, totally clear sky. We settle our mind, our body, our breath into that calm, clear place. And we notice a thought has arisen. I notice it's raining outside. Now I got to get an umbrella. Am I going to get wet on the way to the train? Back to the breath. Or that thought, oh, I got to take an umbrella. Am I going to be wet when I arrive at my destination? That thought, I don't push it away. I don't keep following it. I'm just going to notice it as a cloud that has arisen in that vast, limitless, stainless sky-like nature of my mind and dissolves right back into that same sky from where it came, leaving no trace, no mark, no damage, and settle back into that sky again, into the next thought, which again, I imagine as a cloud that has arisen in that same sky-like nature of my mind. And I watch it dissolve again, leaving no trace, no blemish, no mark, no damage. And that's all we do. That calm, limitless clarity, sky-like nature of mind is our true nature, ultimate nature. It is always with us, always there, and always accessible. The thoughts are impermanent. The thoughts come and go. The thoughts leave no trace. When they're gone, they may come back, but they'll go back and dissolve the same way. Same way as they arose, they dissolve. If you need a gulp of oxygen, take a deep breath and settle back into your just relaxed normal breath. All right. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we'll get to some questions. I will say, those of you who are new, who haven't heard this, if you're interested in books on Buddhism and teachers, we have lists of them on our website at solidagoproductions.com. So if those of you who want to either make contact with a teacher or watch teachings on YouTube, we have a list of teachers. Go to their website, Google them on YouTube, and you can find teachings. If you subscribe to their website email list, you can get notifications about retreats, teachings, sometimes maybe in your town or a place where you can travel to and actually see them. A lot of these retreats and teachings and empowerments now they offer online, live, but online or even archived. So there are many possibilities to get teachings, make contact with teachers. And it's because of technology that we have this myriad of opportunities and ways of getting the Dharma. So Solidago Productions. What made you have an interest in meditation and Buddhism? And to make a long story short, for me personally, after reaching a certain level of achievement of certain goals that I thought were very important, that were really, the ultimate kind of fulfillment of the self, I realized that was not true and needed other methods or means to follow. Have you read the novel Siddhartha? Yes. Siddhartha is not a Dharma text. It's a story. If that interests you, and Buddhism interests you, we always encourage you to go to the source, to the sutras, or the authentic teachers from authentic Buddhist lineages. As we say, there's many on the website. What is your advice regarding appreciation versus appropriation as a student of Buddhism? Buddhism traveled from, Buddha was actually on the border of born on Nepal and India, and Buddhism spread to many different countries, first in Asia and then all over the world. And when it traveled, often it would adopt the various cultural aspects of the place it was in, but the teachings are the same and never changed. Very often, especially in the West, you may feel seduced a little by the exoticism of the iconography and the cultural trappings of whatever Buddhist tradition you're following, be it Tibetan or Southeast Asian Thai Buddhism or Zen Buddhism or something. But we're not trying to become, the Victorian practice in the Tibetan tradition, we're not trying to become Tibetan. We're Buddhists practicing in the Tibetan tradition. So we're not appropriating Tibetan culture. We're studying the Dharma and trying to practice the Dharma. That's where the difference is, basically.
Because Buddha nature is universal. It's just the nature of mind. All sentient beings have the nature of mind. Everything that happens to them, the little bubbles, the differentiations happen on this universal basis. And so what Buddha gave us is the method for how to see the nature of mind. All of Buddhist methodologies, all of Buddhist, quote, in quotation marks, techniques, are all teachings, are only meant to bring one to see one's own nature of mind, not someone else's tradition, not someone else's advice, not someone else's ethical system, but one's own nature of mind. So it's very important to remember we're not speaking about an intellectual tradition merely. Of course, there is an intellectual tradition. It's like wearing a suit, but the person inside it, it's a universal thing, and it must be gained experientially. Buddhism is only insofar as it is experienced. It only works insofar as it is experienced. Having it as another library collection on one's shelf is useless. It's like having medicine against ignorance and suffering and never taking it. So just remembering that it's, it's what it's for and what it's about.
I am with my mother. She has had real tragedies. She never speaks of it. Not because she can't, it's that she has peace in knowing it. I am loud, even when silent. I love her for who she is. Am I lacking wisdom?
I mean, you have to answer this. You answer this yourself, I feel, because you see that your mother, who has experienced a lot of tragedy, can live with it, and that is wisdom, as you say yourself. You're, reacting to every bubble and pursuing every raindrop is the cause of suffering. Like the quote I read from Rinpoche is, the basis of suffering is endless pursuit of one thought after another as they arise, after they arise. Reacting to our judgments, regurgitating them, it is a waste of time, basically. The serenity that comes as a result of wisdom, of understanding karma, cause and effect, impermanence, interdependence, that is wisdom, of course. And, needless to say, Buddhism is all about bringing us that state of mind, going from ordinary state of mind of a deluded ordinary being, that means conceptual mind, to a state of mind that transcends the conceptual mind and transcends the ego dualistic mind. And that's what the method is for. That's what the teaching is for. That's what is the blessing of the teaching.
Do you think psychedelics such as mushrooms or ayahuasca have a place in meditation as they're becoming more and more popular in our culture? I have no from again, I'm only speaking from a Buddhist perspective. I've never heard of psychedelics, mushrooms spoken about in from any Buddhist lama. None have ever recommended it as a help to Buddhism, to Buddhist practice, or for meditation. But at the same time, if you do seek out these experiences and they inspire you to practice Dharma, study Buddhism, find a teacher, meditate, if for whatever experience you have in this through this psychedelic inspires you towards that, for somehow it opens some light bulb goes off and says, I need to meditate, I need to find a teacher, I think that's okay. But I've never heard any recommendations for any of those things from any Buddhist teacher.
And may I add, let's not confuse pleasurable, daily, ordinary, dualistic experiences. When we're taking a bath, or we're having a great meal, or we're sitting on our balcony looking at the sky, we're taking a walk. Let's not confuse them with meditation. This word mindfulness meditation is now used like toilet paper in the West, very in every case for every scenario, but we should not delude ourselves. Meditation is something very, very specific. It requires the view and the method. If we are not using the view and we're not using the method, we're doing something else. We're engaging in pleasant activities. We're walking, we're eating, we're sitting. Even when we're sitting and we call it meditation, but we're not using the view and we're not using methods, we are just sitting, we're just spacing out, we're relaxing, we're doing other kinds of things, we're taking a bath, but we should know that, we should be aware when we engage in other activities that we're not meditating. Now, meditation can also be done while walking and doing other kinds of things, but we really need to know what these components are, and we should not confuse them with things that, produce pleasure. Although meditation and enlightenment is talked in context of bliss, it's beyond pleasure. When the mind gains its natural seat, when we see the face of the mind, the teachers speak of bliss, not pleasure. There is the state of the mind in its ultimate condition that is very blissful. That's why often you can see great meditators, even the face of the Buddha often has that little light smile. It's that point of being in the nature of mind that, is devoid of suffering, is devoid of dualism and grasping. So it's devoid of suffering. So yes, it's talked about in context of bliss, but not pleasure. Pleasure is not bliss, and we should not be attached to bliss even in meditation.
Do all forms of Buddhism believe in karma and reincarnation? I can't speak to all traditions of Buddhism because I only study one. And very much so in Tibetan Buddhist tradition do they speak of karma and reincarnation. I don't know. I can't speak to others because I haven't studied. I don't have a comprehensive knowledge of all the traditions of Buddhism. You have more of a knowledge in that to other ones. Do all? I mean, there's Buddhist teachers. There's certain Buddhist teachers who speak of Buddhism without that, but I don't. There's one who I won't mention, who I think is from England, who's written about these things. But it's just an opinion of one person that I don't really put a lot of credence into. The masters that I've studied with and read about, those are the people I put my faith into.
Buddha, who originally brought this method to us, the map for enlightenment, for us to see our own nature, he spoke about it in terms of accumulation of endless eons of merit. In other words, the historical Buddha could recollect eons and eons of lifetimes of where he went from ignorance, from like the dark to the light. It took many, many lifetimes of accumulating merit and wisdom to get to that place. So this whole thing of we can cherry pick with a reincarnation, without reincarnation, we're not baking a pie. This is what our lives are. We go from ignorance. It's just like within our own lifetime, we can see how we go from being a child and being very ignorant and in a very tiny little bubble to the expansion of where little by little we can start to go beyond this ourself and our own needs and concerns and begin to see and encompass the needs and you know ideas of the others. And we call ultimately wise people those who kind of lose the sense of self and can live outside of those confines of what is in it for me. But it takes many, even within one's lifetime, we can see this transition from self to selfless or more selfless. Of course, doesn't happen to everyone, but it takes lives, many lifetimes, to attain enlightenment because of the accumulation of wisdom and merit. And so, and the other component of it is, of course, you know, purely scientific, and that is that the mind awareness is not the five elements of the body. You know, our thoughts, our desires, our afflictions, you know, our anger, our desire, etc. They're not graspable physical things. They're not in the realm of the five elements. And yet that is what we primarily are. As much as we want to identify with the body, we're not the five elements. When the mind leaves the vessel, the five elements, you know, the five elements are called the corpse. That separation of the mind leaving the body behind is, you know, we know what that's called. You know, that happens at the time of death. But Buddha talked about karma, cause and effect. That is the basis of suffering. If we don't take karma, cause and effect, we will never understand what the suffering is, the result of past activity. The result, karma is the result of past action. So if we didn't have past lives, where is the past actions? It's not all accumulated. And in fact, the teachers say, look at your own body right now in this life if you want to know what your activity was in the past life. So how could we speak about that if we didn't have past lives? And how is karma accumulated and transferred to these lives? Why are we dealing with difficulties now if we did not have transgressive activity, selfish grasping activity, and ignorance in the past lives? So cherry picking is not really Buddhism. Right. That's just some kind of like a little intellectual offspur that pretends to be Buddhism. But Buddhism is Buddhism. And if you want Buddhism, you have to take the whole thing, you know? It's like we can't just abstract one element of medicine if we want to be, you know, if we want to go from ignorant to enlightenment. We have to take the whole thing.
This is a very good question from Anna. I can't pronounce your last name, Kunahan. Very good question. What does merit mean in terms of Buddhism? We were having lunch with Vesna Wallace, who taught 2 classes here. Vesna Wallace is a great Buddhist scholar and practitioner and friend of ours, fortunately. And I asked her that exact question the last time I saw her, and she said it's virtue. Virtuous activity, like the 6 paramitas. There's just generosity, discipline, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom, kindness, love and kindness, you know, virtuous behavior, you know, thinking of others. That's merit. So you're talking about merit in terms of karma, you know, good motivation. Why in the beginning we dedicate our merit, good motivation, good aspirations, often leads good motivation leads to good results. Selfish motivation leads usually to tainted result, right? So merit, accumulation of merit means actions of body, speech, and mind keep more and more lean towards things that are virtuous. And as merit increases, you know, that's how you make progress on a spiritual path, when you combine the merit with your with the understanding of the view of Buddhism and with your diligence of your practice. This is a good question too. Are all thoughts supposed to be observed and let go? What if you have something you're thinking of that you want to manifest by thinking about it and focusing on it? Well, if you're sitting down to practice meditation, then yes, you're dealing with watching the thoughts, letting them go, settling back into that calm clarity. If you're lying on the couch thinking about things you want to change in your life or manifest in your life, then you're not sitting down to formal meditation practice. You're being creative. If it's kind of a combination of the two, if you're sitting in meditation practice, listen, I mean, I'm very often writing different things, right? If I'm sitting in a formal meditation practice session, and a good idea pops into my head, I'm probably going to write it down. Because if I feel it's really important, I never trust myself to remember ideas. I always try to write them down. So, but I'm not sitting in meditation practice to get ideas, if that makes sense. I hope that's clear. There's 2 or 3 questions about regret, and how regret and of past behaviors and things and actions in the past are limiting their letting go of guilt and limiting forward progress.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. There is the 7-branch offering that is traditionally done in the beginning of all Buddhist practices. One of them is confession. Confession liberates us when we understand that that there's something that we've done that was against our Buddha nature, against the right ethical conduct, against virtue. The point is to understand it and make a vow. Actually, that is a practice that we do every evening. We're supposed to look at our activities of the whole. In the morning, we set our intention to be the best, to get as close to our Buddha nature as we can, like our whole path should be going toward our ultimate nature. In the evening, we are on this end. We're examining everything that we've done through the day, and that's the time that we do this kind of purification practice. That we start with confessing our faults, and we examine everything we do, and we say, I've done this, I could have done it better, I've done this, I spoke harshly, I did this, I wasn't as kind, I was too, impatient, I was too obnoxious, I was too self-grasping. The point is, when we make confession, is to confess and let go, and you let go, you liberate the negativity by vowing to do the better deed, by being better, by being virtuous, by being mindful, not to get stuck in the regret and in the remorse. And remember, we can always speak to those who have passed from our life, those who are no longer here. It's about liberating the energy of negativity. It's not about compounding it with more negativity and being stuck and making it into glue. Of course, we've done unvirtuous acts. We're here in samsara. If we were perfect Buddhas, we would be in Buddha fields. So what is there, of course, we will do unvirtuous things. Our energy is still like baby energy. We will still be selfish and do compulsively or habitually negative things. But when we see that, when this mind shines the lamp, and we see that, what we do then, we say, I will abandon this activity and I will do everything. I vow from this moment onward not to speak like this, not to lose my patience, not to use harsh words, etc., etc. That's what we do. So in many ways, use that remorse as the mind shining the light on a difficult, dark place. But make sure that you sweep it clean by saying the vow and moving into the next day, maybe in the morning, remembering, okay, last night I saw this and I gave confession. Now, this morning, I have to make a vow that I will act this way. I will not speak harshly in the office. I will not speak harshly with my child. I will not lose patience. I will be, and you set your intention in the morning and you examine and do confession at night. And those are kind of like the two bookends for the full cycle of the 24 hours. And so confession is very, very positive because it makes us see the defective places and we know what we have to fix. And then the next day we arise, we make a strong vow to really pay attention in those places where we trip and we fall, as not to do that again and again. Because the more we do the trip and fall and we stay and stuck in that place, it becomes a habitual pattern, very difficult to, like any addictive habitual pattern. Addiction is habitual pattern, not to turn it into like an addictive behavior, but to get away from it and liberate that energy. Use that difficulty to liberate the negativity and to vow for being mindful each time we meet that situation. Do not get stuck in remorse. Use remorse like fuel to move away from it to a lighter place.
We're gonna wrap it up, but someone asked the five element. What are the five elements? It's earth, wind, water, fire, and space. If you think in terms of the body, earth, the actual kind of physical, mineral, whatever, metal or earth elements that make up the body. Water is in our body. We're made up a lot of water in our body. Heat, the heat within our body is the fire element. When you die, the heat element leaves, as do all the other elements, the water element. But heat, that's one of the things you could feel when someone dies, is the heat gone. The wind is the air that we breathe, and space is literally space that exists. Everything exists within space. Space being the limitless, and everything arises, all the planets and stars and us, and even within the body there is space. So the actual elements rest there in space. Those are the five elements.
And when the elements are balanced, we have health. And also, just to like a little side note, the wind element and the space element are the most connected to the mind. The wind element, very often, like our anger, is that sharpness of the wind. Anxiety is the wind getting stuck in us. And, when we don't know elemental nature, and how the wind is also what is called in Tibetan Buddhism, we refer to the wind energy as the horse, and the mind, the space element, as the rider. So very important to, there's so much written on all of this. You can, look into it yourself. But wind, very related to our emotions.
One person asked, can a pagan be a Buddhist? I don't really know anything about paganism, but Buddhism is not a theistic religion. Buddha is not a god or worshipped as a god. You can't be Buddhist and another religion. Either you're a Buddhist or you're not. For those of you who are interested in that, what that means, there's a great book called What Makes You Not a Buddhist by Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. His name is on our website. You can look up that book to talk about. He makes those distinctions very clear in that book. So let's close today. Let's thank our producer, Nick Solidio, for his generosity and kindness. And we close, as we always do, by dedicating the merit, which we spoke about today, of being virtue. So the virtue of engaging in this class today, of meeting together, deciding to commit to meditation practice together, and talk about cultivating our mind and walking a spiritual path. And if you're a Buddhist, practicing Buddhism and these things, which ultimately is for the benefit of all beings. So we dedicate that merit that we engaged in and that we accumulated today. We're going to dedicate that merit for the benefit of all beings by saying this dedication prayer. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. See you next week. Thank you.